Welcome back to the home front. This is your host. I am your host, Reed Galen. Today, I am once again joined by the inimitable Katie Phang. Katie, welcome back.
I dig that adjective, Reed. Always. I'll take it.
That's all right. I've got my thesaurus here. The next one's going to be even better.
Love it.
All right. So while you and I are talking in Washington, D.C., something it's unfortunately remarkable, but it is remarkable, which is yesterday there was a closed door meeting with bipartisan members of Congress listening to victims of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna have led the charge on a discharge petition to bring this stuff to a vote. There's the video of a teary-eyed, almost sobbing Nancy Mace leaving the meeting. Now, who knows? Even now, I will give her the benefit of the doubt. I will provide some grace when she wouldn't to so many others. But
True.
What is your assessment of all of this? Is this we've been waiting 10 years for the thing, but this is the one that seems to not have died. It sort of went quiet a little bit in August, but everybody came back from recess, and now here we are again.
Well, Reed, if you'll recall, it went quiet in August, but not by choice, right? As in the Democrats didn't want it to do. You saw House Speaker Mike Johnson, he chicken shitted out, right? I mean, he was like, I'm just gonna peace out and I'm gonna make everybody go home because we're not gonna force this issue, which is why his hypocrisy drives me nuts, that he's calling for this House vote that's basically performative because you don't need a vote for the House Oversight Committee to continue to do its investigation. But even yesterday, though, Reed, we have to be very mindful about the credit giving credit where credit is due. Anna Paulina Luna, House GOP, making it seem like whatever they posted publicly was some type of big disclosure from the DOJ. Congressman Robert Garcia from House Oversight said it's exactly the same stuff that he got from the first tranche from the DOJ, of which 97% was stuff that was already publicly available. And
Right.
The only documents that were not were flight logs. And those in and of themselves were not, anything revelatory. I will say this to Reed. The fact that you and I are having this conversation on September 3rd of 2025, and again, because this was in my backyard, this was all transpiring in the mid-2000s when I was here, these have been victims and survivors of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and others and other predators since the mid-2000s, if not earlier, right? Like, as in, like, the prosecutions could have happened, Reed, in the mid-2000s. So the fact that we are even having this dialogue, and this is a part of our discourse today, is a travesty. It is a failure of our judicial system. It's a failure of politics. It's a failure of our society that these women have to stand. And listen, I will say this, whatever you think about Gloria Allrich, I caught her speaking. She said something that I thought was so on point, Reed, and so powerful. She says, power recognizes power.
Mm-hmm.
And when you empower these victims and survivors to do this now through Ro Khanna, Tom Massie, and other people's support, then I agree. You meet the challenge where it is. And then I think it also dovetails to this idea that, is this now an example of how Democrats are recognizing that power recognizes power, and this is how we play the game? And I'm not trying to say that any of these horrible things are games, Reed, but you and I both know politics is a lot of theater, right, sometimes? And that's something that the Republicans and Trump have done well, but I think in this instance, they are failing miserably in trying to hide this from public consumption.
Well, yeah, and in this, remember, just to go back to the Trump side of these things for a minute, Katie, is the Epstein stuff, guys, is foundational to the MAGA myth that Trump was the one who, yes, he was friends with this guy, but famously excommunicated him. But he was going to be the one that uncovered all this stuff, because what was the thing that was so bad? It was child abuse. It was child rape, but also it was the rich and the wealthy and the powerful getting away with it. And Donald Trump was going to stop that, right? That was the whole part of it. And what's happening now is that the MAGA faithful, and look, Massie is an interesting case because he's
an odd bird, huh?
He's
odd
like the
bird.
bizarre. He's like bizarro MAGA, right? He's just like everybody else now, and I think that's causing a lot of this sort of rift politically, but I think also, as you probably seen in your experience in the law, is there's a massive collective psychological break happening, which people are like, but he was supposed to be different. He was supposed to be the one that was going to end all this, that the uniparty couldn't get away with it, that the wealthy couldn't get away with it, that the plutocrats, he was going to hold them to account. And now he's not. And I think that's one other piece of this too, is that there are people, on the Republican side of the aisle, whether it's Massey or others, who do believe that this should be brought to light for the right reasons. There are Democrats. Look, politics ain't beanbag, guys, right? Like, you got to do what you got to do. You got to play the game you're in. And in many ways, it is a game. And if the job is to push Trump back into a corner so he is less effective and less able to do the things he can do, or to drive his people away from him, then, guys, that's the strategy and the tactic. Whether it's ugly or not, I'm sorry, right? Like, we have to, Katie, I'll say this, we got to, to my Democratic friends, you got to stop being so precious, right? Like, this is an ugly, ugly thing, right? There is a woman who is still sitting in prison who is likely to get less time in prison, or she's already been moved because she's going to cooperate. And here's the part of it is, like, we shouldn't expect that Trump is necessarily going to go anywhere, but we should expect that everybody around him, to your point, Katie, is like, wait a second, if these people who are diehard Trump people, they're not going to vote for Democrats. They're probably not even going to vote for moderate Republicans. If they stay home, that's catastrophic for the GOP too.
Yeah, listen, that's a really good point. And then we look at people like Lauren Boebert, who I think is not redeemable at all. That woman has no potential for a redemption arc whatsoever, but she signed off on that discharge petition. Why? Because this is political kryptonite for them. And again, what has happened to the victims and the survivors of Epstein and Maxwell and others is horrific. And having prosecuted these cases, I can tell you that the ask that we are making of these women, because recall, these were children when they were abused, right? And that's why I want to emphasize the length of time that it has taken to get to this point. But we are asking so much of them that at the least it should be a not political decision to achieve transparency. And for those politicians that want to continue to aid in the cover up, they deserve to be publicly humiliated, even if it means as well as them losing their offices. Why? Because if there's a bright line read that we don't cross, it's child sex predation, right? Child sex trafficking. That is one thing that we know universally is it has no political kind of brand or affiliation of loyalty, right? That is it. Well, all crime should be, but the point is, I just feel like this has become such an issue, and it's interesting though because I just read a piece this morning. I was happy that you and I were joining because I wanted to pick your brain too about it, Reed. It was a piece that said Scott Jennings. I know. Scott Jennings.
A double-A ball player of the highest levels. This guy would never have made it in the major leagues.
Reed, I'm sorry because I do love Abby very much, Abby Phillips. But him and Ben Shapiro on CNN last night, I'm sorry. It's bad enough with Scott Jennings, but then you're going to give Ben Shapiro a platform too. That is a whole other conversation you and I need to have about that.
If I go to hell, it will be me in Abby's chair for eternity dealing with those two. That would be my version of hell.
I can't imagine why you would give them real estate. Anyway, so there was a piece, Reed, where it had a quote from Scott Jennings and a quote from S.E. Cupp that said that we, as in Democrats, like, we can't expect Epstein to be policy for us, right? Like, Epstein is not going to be enough for us as Democrats. I'm not saying that it's my policy. I'm just saying that if I can use it, to your point, as a huge effing cudgel to point out the hypocrisy of Trump claiming on his campaign that he was going to bring all of this to light, and us seriously saying, look, people, you are being snowed day in, day out, and the Epstein files is just the tip of the iceberg for you, then why not be able to use this as a part of the discourse, as a part of the conversation?
Right. Well, look, remember that Donald Trump in the 2016 election brought the women that had accused Bill Clinton of
he parked them right there in the front, right?
Yeah. To a presidential debate, right? So, like, let's be very clear about, like, the level of people we're dealing with. I think the other part about, the idea it's not policy, again, this is why these guys aren't very good at politics, which is, if you look at this strategically, like, what's the objective? for the next 13 months, is to keep Republicans on their heels and have Democrats advancing. So the Epstein piece, what does that do? You use that as one thrust to push MAGA voters away from the GOP generally. Maybe they're not going to turn on Trump, but they don't like Republicans necessarily either. Then you have the tariffs. Then you have any number of other things. Then you can start to say, okay, and here's what we would do, right? So there's the offensive of pushing them back out of territory you don't want them in, or to get them to stay away from the polls. And then you come in and you say, and by the way, we're doing this, and when we take over, here's what's going to happen. And you know what that does? That energizes your base and independent voters who are sick of things. Guys, this is politics 101, right? Like, I say this for the benefit of my Democratic friends. I hope you're listening and recording this. Like, this is not complicated, right? This stuff is not complicated. You just got to go out and do it. But let me ask you, Katie, let me go back to a broader point about something you said about prosecution, which is this is still, unfortunately, far too often the norm, which is a female victim or victims get no justice while the male perpetrator or perpetrators do. And is that a failing of the system? Like, why is that continuing today? I read a story years ago that said in schools, when a male student is accused of something and a female student has been abused or affected, assaulted, whatever, 90% of the time it's the female student that leaves the school and the male student stays. Why do we still have that?
Because we unfortunately still swim in the cesspool of gender biases, and we also have this problem of not believing the women. And I think it's because we're so quick to judge women. I'll tell you, Reed, from just experience, right? Like when I had a case as a prosecutor, or even a case as a civil litigator, I was very careful about my jury selection because women can judge women very harshly. Women can judge women very harshly. And that may sound counterintuitive to those of you that are tuning in, and I'd love to know your thoughts, so please let us know in the chat. Women can be very hard on other women, but there are unreasonable expectations that are imposed upon victims of sexual abuse and sexual assault that have no bearing in the legal world, but are used as weapons. They're weaponized in legal proceedings against victims.
Right.
In this particular context of the Epstein, Maxwell, et cetera thing, I think Ghislaine Maxwell occupies a very unusual space, doesn't she? That she herself was not just a co-conspirator, facilitator, groomer, but she herself participated in the abuse of these children. One. Two, I do think it's also such an outlier in that there was a grand jury impaneled in the Southern District of Florida in the mid-2000s, Reed, that was prepared to consider the indictment of Jeffrey Epstein. And but for the intervention of then U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of Florida, Alex Acosta, and the Palm Beach County State Attorney, and people, as I say, that have money and means, but for that, there could have been a successful federal prosecution of Epstein as early as the mid-2000s. There could have been this kind of transparency that we're all seeking now 20 years later, 20 years ago. And so I feel like we have to always look to this case and the nuances of it, as well as Ghislaine Maxwell's case, even now with her being moved to a camp, to a minimum security camp, right, in Texas. We have to look at these things and we have to continue to elevate them as we talk about Trump's dementia, as we talk about him being found to have done illegal moves with the tariffs, illegal moves concerning the invocation of the AEA, right? We continue to have these conversations, Reed, but we have to always talk about this case or these cases because they occupy a space in American history because, don't take my word for it, federal judges have said that he, as an Epstein, was the most prolific pedophile in American history.
So let's go back to that because this was a very different time when Acosta was U.S. Attorney down there. I assume that President George W. Bush was in office. It would have been either Attorney General John Ashcroft or maybe Alberto Gonzales. And so let me ask a process question. Does Acosta get to make that decision on his own, or does he have to send that question up to main justice when you're dealing with somebody like this?
There's an incredible amount of discretion that's afforded to him as an Alex Acosta as the U.S. Attorney. I suspect, though, considering the people that were involved in this, Reed, I suspect that it went as high as Maine, because think about the names that are a part of these files. I mean, that is why there was such a hard fought battle for people to be able to hide this from the American people. And let me be clear, I'm not talking just Republicans, I'm talking Democrats as well, right? So I think considering the names and the people that are at play here, I think that that's the reason why it would have gone above Alex Acosta's head. And knowing Acosta as I know him, he's not really known for having a steely spine, right? This is definitely not something that he would have been like, I am going to take one for the team and do that. Like, it was more like, I'm sure he was told this is what you're going to be doing. And then you couple that though with the fact that, and I walked through that non-prosecution agreement on my YouTube channel, and I went through every single detail of it because it was so offensive. Read, there was this distinct provision contained within that non-prosecution agreement that was an agreement by all parties that that agreement was going to remain confidential and secret.
Mm-hmm.
If you're so proud of and you have nothing to hide, a la these masked people that are kidnapping people off the United States streets, right? What are you hiding? If there's nothing wrong with this non-prosecution agreement, why would there have been a provision to keep it secret?
Right.
Why? Because they didn't want the victims to know, because they did it without them knowing, and they didn't want Americans to know what people were up to at the time, which is why I'm grateful that House Oversight Dems and others, including all of us here, kept the pressure on. And so now Acosta has to go and testify. Although a House Oversight Congressional Depot, I mean, you tell me, Reed, I don't really think that that's as compelling. But at least he has to come and say something, which he hasn't, by the way, in 20 years.
Right. No, and I assume he, like anybody else, could invoke the Fifth Amendment if he wanted to, or if he thought he needed to. And I don't know, I don't know about the statute of limitations on these things, but I want to get to one thing that you said previously,
Sure.
which was there will be, if whatever this list is or whatever this information is, there are likely to be Democrats on it. There are likely to be very high net worth Americans on this list too. And I guess my question for you is, do you think that establishment Dems will throw those people who are on the list to the wolves when the time comes? Because that's what I would do. To your point, if child predation, if child predation is the line that cannot and should not and would not ever be crossed in a just world, then how can you even possibly defend them being on the list?
Can't, which is why the only kind of space that I think you could occupy in that conversation, Reed, would be some distinction, obviously, between those that flew on the plane, right? That flew on the plane but didn't do anything wrong. And it's interesting because I don't doubt that there are that subset of people that exist that were in the Epstein orbit or sphere during the relevant times. But that is not an excuse not to put it all out there, right? That's not an excuse not to put it all out there. I think people using their critical thinking skills can make a determination to deduce on their own the level of somebody's culpability and involvement. But the fact that this went on as a trafficking ring internationally for decades, and the only people that have been held to account is just Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, is a total ashanda. Like it is a total shame. We as civilized people in a just society should be humiliated that those are the only people. And you're looking at these beautiful, strong victims coming forward and speaking out now. And there's only been two people, only two, because we know it was more than two, Reed. We know it was more than two.
Right. All right. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's stay in Washington, D.C. Let's stay at the Capitol and talk a little bit of budget and politics. So because the U.S. Congress and the federal government budget like I did when I got my first credit card when I was 19, we have yet another budget deadline coming up on September 30th. The last time we had one of these things, Chuck Schumer and 9 other Democrats voted to advance the budget bill in the U.S. Senate, causing a lot of, I think, justified hail and fury. He has now sent a letter to his colleagues saying that the Republicans need to work in a bipartisan fashion, that they're marching us towards a shutdown. Do you believe that the Dems, the Democratic Senate leadership, will have, as you said, backbone to force a shutdown if they do not receive major concessions from Majority Leader John Thune or Donald Trump?
Will they have it? Probably not. Should they have it? Yes. What do we have left to lose, Reed? That big bullshit bill got passed. Honestly, what do we have to lose? I think that And I don't mean that as somebody who's trying to be flippant about people's finances, right? I mean, it
Right.
impacts me too. Um, but why more concessions? Why more? Doesn't there come a point in time when we have to acknowledge that every concession and every conciliatory move we make as Democrats is to use, this idea by Gloria Allred, right? It's not powerful. There is this there is no more nobility in my mind, Reed, about this idea of working with people that are unreasonable, illogical, and just cult followers to somebody else's thing. Like, look, like if you and I, as colleagues, were trying to figure something out, I would sit down and say, Reed, look, I know we don't see eye to eye on this, but this is only if I thought I was talking to Reed Galen. And I
Hmm.
was and it was me and Reed and Katie
Hmm.
we're trying to find that mind meld to get something done. But if you are only taking orders from someone above you, right? And you're not actually thinking in your own independent mind, what's the point of having the dialogue with you?
Hmm.
And I know having the dialogue with felon Trump isn't going to get anything done. So what's the utility? I mean, what do we have left to lose if we sit there and say, tough shit, you guys kick the can down the road every single time when it comes to this budget issue, right? And there's always this threat and this last minute scramble. It's not on us. This is all on you. You guys have the triumvirate. You have the Oval, you have the Senate, you have the House. All of the shit show that's happening right now, this is yours. You broke it, you buy it. So go ahead, fix it. Fix it and make it work. But don't look to us to be able to help you get it across the finish line.
Right. And look, for me, my fear is that if there is a capitulation again, and that's what it would be, that it would shatter the Democratic coalition, and we might not have time to put it back together. That
You don't think we're already you don't really think we're already fractured already though?
No, we are, but to the point where, I mean, look, this is how I've experienced now fighting alongside Democrats for almost 6 years. We're
Mm.
now, right now, we're in the sky is falling, we're all going to die phase. Oh, no, no, sorry. We're still at the end of the exhaustion phase. We're
Oh,
still at the end of the exhaustion
we're
phase.
not we're not Chicken Little yet, according to you.
No, Q4 and Q4 25 and Q1 26 will be, we're all going to die. The sky is falling, right? We're the Joni Ernst, right? We're all going to die anyway. Q2 and Q3 will be like, oh my God, we have to do something. Let's start giving money. Let's start getting active, yada, yada, yada. And then Q4, and then post Labor Day, hope against hope we win. Like that's been my
Oh.
experience fighting alongside Democrats. But that being said, is there are so, even we have friends, I have friends who, you know, they don't like Trump. They don't really like Republicans. They don't like Democrats either. So, like, let's just take them off the board. But if you have Democratic voters who did show up last time, but are sort of disaffected by what they see as a lack of spine, and then they just decide, you know what, to hell with it. They join the ranks of the people who vote with, they vote the couch, right? Like I got R, I got D, I got couch. I'm going to just take the couch because it doesn't matter anyway. I'm afraid it increases that number a great deal, which is they're just people who, especially voters of color and younger voters, who just throw up their hands and say they're not any different, right? They say they're going to fight, but they don't fight. I told you I don't want these old people. I've told you I want something different. I told you I want you to show me that you really care about this stuff, and time again you don't. That's my fear. Is less about people going from Democrat to Republican and Democratic voters just saying, to hell with it. It doesn't matter anyway.
I had this really fascinating conversation that I'm going to drop on my channel later, which is with the New Mexico Attorney General, Raul Torres. Really
Mm-hmm.
fascinating conversation. And the reason why I appreciated his candor and transparency was this. He said, because, I like to say, Reed, it's facts, not feelings. But you and I both know, as I've heard from people from 2024 and prior and moving forward, that people vote on vibes. For what it's worth, people vote on vibes. And the thing that Torres said, which I thought really resonated with me, was this. When he, as a district attorney in Metro Albuquerque, was dealing with victims, like he was like, look, you can't look at somebody like the public safety issue, right? You can't look at somebody who's been the victim of a crime and be like, but here, look at the statistics. Crime is down. I don't know why you're talking about it like this, right? Because emotionally, they've been the victim of a crime. So for them, even if they can look objectively at a graph and see that crime rates are down, for them, the emotional component and the tie to what has happened to them is too hard to ignore.
Mhm.
Translate that to, or extrapolate that to, the economy. Yes, we had one of the best gangbusters, amazing economies in the Biden administration. But to other people's points that are well taken, when you're sitting there and you're looking at your freaking receipt at the grocery store, or you're having to steal from Peter to feed Paul to be able to make ends meet, you can objectively look at it and say, yeah, I see that we're doing so well, but how do I feel? Part of that has to come into play, right? Which is, and giving some grace to maybe to what S.E. Cupp was saying about this whole thing with Epstein. We have to come to the table with solutions, and we have to come to the table with answers. And those solutions and answers can't be, but look at the numbers, but look at the graph. The graph is
Right.
your friend. Nobody's going to give a shit about the graph, Reed, when it comes time to voting. To your point, they're going to be like, peace out. I'm not even getting off my couch because I've said that I feel politically disaffected. I don't have a home and nobody's listening to me. Which, by the way, maybe everything on paper is going great for you, but if you don't feel like it's making sense, that
Right.
is a problem. And I think that when you see, though, things like the No King's Day 2.0 coming up on October 18th, when you see how well those things have happened, the hands off, the No King's Days, I think you're seeing that people are getting off the couch. And I think that, but they are asking for a change in leadership. And I have been saying this now a lot. I respect for our electeds, but several of our electeds in DC on the Democratic side, Reed, are not doing what we need them to do.
Right. And let me just say, going back to your vibes thing, right? Like this is, I said this to another guest I had, that Democrats fight on issues, Republicans fight on values, right? Like when we fight, we're trying to get to your heart, right? Why? Because voting is ultimately emotional, and then you wrap rationality around it. I'll just tell you a brief story. 2008, sitting at a bar with a colleague, eating dinner during a campaign, and it's the Obama McCain debate. And the bartender, whenever Obama's on the screen, she's just lit up, right? She's just effusing joy. And when McCain comes, she starts to wash dishes. And I say, excuse me, like, what about Obama do you like? She's like, hope, change, everything else. I say, but like, what policy? And she sort of got frustrated with me because she couldn't tell me because it wasn't about that, right? He represented a vessel into which she could put her hope and change, right? And that's how it works, right? It's not like, well, he's going to do 8% better on this, and he's going to do 6% better on this, and this, and this, and this, and this, right? I mean, hope and change and make America great again are the same thing, except one's in the major key and one's in the minor key, but they both represent change. And we are in a change environment. We're in an anti-establishment environment. And I think that until and unless, to your point, those same establishment Democratic leaders, and I put that in air quotes, understand that, it's very difficult for their candidates across the country to break out of that. Because remember, most campaigns, whether Republican or Democrat, for federal offices, they are not independent operations. They are getting extensive, as I call it assistance. I'm not sure it really is, and direction from the higher ups.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The
Oh,
general
yeah.
consultants are connected to the committees, and the committees are connected to the leaders, and it's all wrapped up in the donors. I was talking to one congressional candidate, and they said, yeah, the DCCC told me my main messaging should be whatever Hakeem Jeffrey says. And they were like, I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm like, I don't think you should do that either. Right. And so, yeah, there's not a lot of independent thought, and there's not a lot of movement for those candidates. And more often than not, when a candidate in a district, again, whether it's Republican or Democrat, I've seen it on both sides, tries to stake a claim on their own thing in their own place for their own reasons, they're more often punished by the mothership than given free license to do what they need to do to win.
Stop very quickly. I'll share this with you. I announced this on another platform, but I was contemplating running for office here in Florida in the 26th cycle. And when I was initially approached to run for office, the pitch was for the attorney general seat, because we have a crazy ass attorney general here in Florida who's been held in contempt by a federal judge. He's the one who coined alligator Alcatraz. I mean, and he, by the way, was never elected. He's a DeSantis crony. Trust me, we've had plenty of them. He took over for Ashley Moody when she took over for Marco Rubio's seat. If you will recall, she became a senator as well because of that. So eventually the conversation morphed a little bit into the contemplation of me running for the United States Senate. And I only say this for the following. One of the things I kept on hearing, which was wild to me, Reed, and I know it's not wild to you because you have been in the space so much longer than me. I am such a novice to this, and you'll probably laugh at my naivete. But I was flat out told to my face, the national people, they're obsessed with you, Katie. Why? Because you have a national presence, if not more, international. And we know that you would garner a lot of support even out of the state of Florida, right? But when I asked the following, how do we overcome a deficit of registered voters in Florida? That's almost like 1 million registered Republicans over Democrats. How do we overcome that? Number one. Number two, I'm told that because it's Florida, they're not going to put the money into Florida, that they're earmarking money for AG races and other races in other places. And I'm like, whoa. Pardon my French. Time the fuck out. If I, as an authentic candidate, am going to run and I know that I can fight like hell to get this, to win, to make this happen, and I will represent my constituents and I will represent Americans at large in a way that is effective. You're telling me y'all not going to put the money over here? And they flat out were like, we're not going to put the money there.
Yeah.
And I hear that and I'm like, who's making these decisions? And why is it like coming from like Zeus from the top of Mount Olympus kind of energy?
Totally.
Because it didn't make any sense. And so again, I am naive. I am new to this, Reed. I know that you are not. That's why I defer to you and the brilliance of how you strategize. But it just, and in the end, by the way, I'm not running, and it's for a variety of reasons, and I'm happy to get into it some other time. But and I'm putting all of my weight behind people that are running all over the country. But I just was very frustrated by that, and it felt so old school to me, Reed. It just felt like it was ignoring the quality of the individual candidates, and it was just kind of an edict that was just being imposed, I want to say, across the country.
Yeah, they don't care, right? Like, they just want the seat. But the flip side of that, too, is they like you because you're famous and because they think you can raise a lot of money. And they think that you could probably raise a lot of money so they wouldn't have to help you. Now, again, I don't know much about the Democratic Attorney General's Association. I'm sure they're very fine people or nice people, but again, these are not, most of these people are on their way to their next job, the next cycle, right? I think that's the other part, is that, like, guys, if you work at one of these committees in your 20s, right, you want a different job, next time around. You want a different job the next time around. So let's say that, you're at DAGA now, and then next time you're at the DCCC. You've made a good run. You've shown you can do it. And now maybe you get picked up by a presidential campaign in 2028, right? And by some miracle, all the stars align and your person's the nominee. And now here you are. And then boom, they win. And now you work for a president. Like, that's the dream for most people, right? Who decide that they want to make campaigns their business. It's very rarely anymore that, like, why do I do this? Because I care about big D Democratic values. Like, you have to choose a team. Right. Now, I was born into the Republican Party, so like it's not that I didn't have a choice. I don't want to abandon agency, but like that, I started working for George W. Bush when I was like 19 years old. Right.
43. So, like, yeah, number 43. Yeah,
when I was in college and he was a governor, and I worked for him all the way through 2005. Right. So like, that was right place, right time, depending on how you look at it. But the point is that so often is that, like, individuality in candidates is not appreciated, right? They don't want it. They want you in a certain line, in a certain box, because then it makes it easier for them. And this is all just a process. It's a terrible process. It doesn't work out right for the most part. And yeah, look, and the idea that you would consider it is amazing. But let me just say one last thing. It's Florida. It's Florida ethos has gotten us to a place where Republicans dominate, I think, something like 30 some state legislatures and governorships, where 71% of races go uncontested. And of those, it's the 3/4 of those, it's the Democrats that don't put anybody up. So, like, if you're not going to compete seriously everywhere, right, then, and look, I understand there's a resource allocation issue. I'm not naive myself, but like, you should at least say, okay, I live in Utah, like, we should at least try and find 29 people to run for the state senate, right? Like, we should at least try and find 90 people to run for state house. Is that easy? No. But as I was on a call with a group of people yesterday, like, this isn't easy. It's not supposed to be easy, right? This is hard. This is all hard stuff. And when I was at the University of Texas, I took a class from a guy named Karl Rove, right? And you know what he said? Quote,
what did he say?
This shit matters. You know what? Republicans seem to understand that, like, and they're willing to do the work. To your point about the deficit and registration and everything else, they are willing to do the work. They're willing to put in the investment, and their people are too. And so often, as I have seen again in the years that I've been working alongside Democrats, is like I was on the phone with a donor yesterday. Well, this seems like a pretty long-term plan. Yeah, right. Like yes. Like it took us a
Yeah,
long time to
yeah.
get here. It's going to take us a
Project
long time to
2025 was not born overnight, by the way. McConnell's
no.
stacking of the judiciary did not happen overnight. The overturning of Roe v. Wade did not happen overnight. This was
No.
a long, they play long ball on the Republican side.
Look, if you look back at what MAGA is now, a lot of it started at the 1964 Barry Goldwater Convention in San Francisco, right?
Shit.
They
Yeah.
waited. They waited. The neoliberal stuff, right, that Ronald Reagan ushered in, right, started in a Swiss mountain town in 1947. The New Deal got its start in the 1890s, right? Like this stuff doesn't happen overnight. And if you only see it, back to where we started at the top, and then I'm going to let you go, as a game, as numbers on a chessboard, as opposed to like, why are we here? What are we doing? Right? What does all this mean? And if it's just like, well, I'm not really trying to change anything, Katie. I'm just trying to hold on to what I've got. Voters are not stupid. Let me say that again. Voters are not stupid. The people I meet on the road, maybe they didn't go to college. In fact, most of them don't. But you know what? It doesn't make them uninformed. They're unimpressed. That's what you see. Why do they choose the couch? Because they're fundamentally unimpressed. And who could blame them?
I love that. This idea that they're not uninformed, that they're unimpressed. I mean, let me be clear and to clarify here for the record. DAGA, the Democratic Attorneys General Association, that is not who I am maligning at all. I am actually one of the biggest fans of the Democratic Attorneys General across the United States. They are the ones getting the job done. They're the ones going to court. They're the ones filing suit. They're the ones getting the results. And they're going toe to toe with this administration. It was more the kind of, and maybe, and this proves our point, right? It was more the elusive, bigger picture, national kind of people, the faceless, nameless people that are sitting there making all these decisions that impact my prospective constituents and me
Right.
as a voter, as a tax-paying citizen. It impacts me, which is why I hate sounding like I'm down on DC. But I do think that one of the beautiful things about running for local and state office is what I've heard when I've spoken to people I've interviewed and met. Is they say those are the people I see on a day-to-day basis. And that disconnect, for whatever reason, Reed, they can't extrapolate that to DC. And that's tragic because the people that go to DC have bigger and more important jobs to do because they are in DC and they are sometimes more impactful. But I like to remind people, including those that are on this Substack here, one, thanks to all of you in the chat that are so supportive about the idea of me running for office. Reed will be my campaign manager. But two, run for office. Run for office. There are organizations out there that are like Emily's List, Ruthless, Emerge America, you name it. There are some amazing organizations out there that will take the mystery out of running for office and look locally and state level. For me, especially in Florida, my life is dictated by what the hell is happening in my county and what is happening in Tallahassee. And so more so sometimes than whatever the hell Rick Scott is not doing for me in DC, right? So I just want to urge people, it's not too late, by the way, to run and to file. And there are organizations out there that can help you do this and they can take the mystery out of taking that first step.
Yes. Also, I want to give a shout out to Amanda Littman and her incredible organization, Run for Something. Also, go to jointheunion.us if you're interested. We can also help you get aligned with those people. And let me just say this, and we are focused at the union on state and local races for 2026 because of what you said. It's your life and your kid's life is far more impacted by your county commission and your school board, right? Or your water board or your sewer commission, whatever it is, on a daily basis, right? That's the life you're living. Now, as you said, not to say, because we've seen it, what happens at the federal level can be very impactful, right? But it's more ethereal, right? You don't feel it right away. Whereas if you break an axle on the pothole that your ground screw didn't fix,
hell yeah,
you're going to go looking for somebody to blame.
When I'm swimming on my kayak because I'm underwater because the pumps are not working because of sea rise in Miami Beach, yes, I totally understand what you're talking about, Reed.
Yes, guys, get involved. And if you don't want to run, there are so many organizations, and I say this not just politically, but like food banks. We have an organization here in my town, Peace House, that takes in battered women and children, right? And let me just actually, can I ask one question? I saw something for an organization like Peace House, and it said for women experiencing violence. I think that short sells what women and children in abusive relationship goes through? Why do we make it the passive voice? Why do we try and sugarcoat what those people are going through?
I think because it's an effort to make it as palatable as humanly possible, so as not to scare people, so as to not. I mean, your point is so well taken. Word choice is so powerful, right? For me, if you're more blunt about it, about the truth, I feel more inspired to help.
Yeah,
Right?
right,
Sometimes I feel it more palpably for me. Um, that's an interesting action verb for them to use, experiencing violence. I don't think they're experiencing it. I mean, I think they are full on under attack. And that is a
right.
very materially different idea of being under attack, and being, damaged and broken than going through the quote experience of it. That is kind of an
Right.
odd choice of words.
Right. But anyway, so guys, sorry, I didn't mean to get
No, it's
away on
okay.
the vocab test. But all right, Katie, where can we find you here on Substack? Where can we find you on YouTube? Where else can we find you?
So I just learned this the other day, Reed. If there's a scrolling little chyron of like a little marquee at the top of the screen, and that apparently, if you click on that, you can subscribe to me and read. So if you do
Oh,
that, you can do
do
that.
that.
I didn't know that apparently. And all of you that are hitting the hearts, I just learned this the other day too. That apparently, Reed, if people are hitting the hearts during these lives, it actually helps our algorithm. It apparently helps us. So that's great. And then I'm also on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel that I'm very proud of. It's called Katie Phang News. And I post what I hope are informative videos breaking down big legal decisions. I did one yesterday on the Breyer decision out of California. It was longer than usual, but I literally will walk through the legal decision and explain the import, the meaning, and the consequence. I just did one this morning that'll drop shortly, that explains the decision of the declaration that Trump's use of the AEA, the Alien Enemies Act, was illegal and that he wasn't allowed to do that. And so I do that as well as talk on other political issues. And then I'm also on other social media like Instagram, etc. at Katie Phang. Very easy, at Katie Phang. Phang is the spelling.
Well, and guys, check out Katie's YouTube channel, because if there's one thing, there's the old Shakespeare line about lawyers, but I'll tell you this: like, a super lawyer in action is really something to behold. I mean, it really is. It is unlike anything else. And so, if you have to get a lawyer, get a super lawyer. But if you don't need a lawyer, watch one in action in Katie over her YouTube channel, guys. As always, you can find me at the home front. I hope you'll subscribe. I've got 2 pieces up this week. The first one was a retrospective. I was in New Orleans and Baton Rouge 20 years ago this week for Katrina. So I walked through my experience there, lots of photos, and it is impactful and indelible in my memory even today. I walked through a little bit of my September look ahead this morning. You can find me again on Instagram and Threads at Reed_Galen USA, and every place else at Reed Galen. Katie, thank you so much for joining me.
It's always so good to see you, my friend. I hope I can see you in person soon, especially in Utah. Oh, I'm so
Absolutely.
jealous always. It's good to see all of you too. Thank you.
It's been hot, but not y'all's hot. So,
oh no, we're it's like, I like to say that we're like at the first, maybe we're beyond the first gate of hell, and that's why it's so hot for us here in Miami. But it is DeSantis.
Well,
it's DeSantis, so it totally makes
right.
sense completely.
With the horns and the tail and all that. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.